You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, you saw the intro. You know what time it is. Brute Wyverns, baby. They're big, they're cool, they're basically just dinosaurs, and they've made a hell of an impact on the fanbase since they first showed up. Introduced alongside the Leviathans back in Monster Hunter Tri, they've done pretty well for themselves with two excellent entries featuring them as the flagship monsters. Characterized by their lack of wings, bipedal stance, and highly aggressive nature, the Brute Wyverns are now a mainstay of any Monster Hunter game and tend to be a pretty significant difficulty spike whenever they show up. Today we're going to take a look at each of them that appear in the mainline series, variations included, and see which of them are shining examples of Brute Wyvernness, and which ones could use a little help somewhere down the line. Ground rules out of the way first, our tiers are S, A, B, C, and D, ranging from perfection to very bad and very sad. We'll be focusing on the Brute Wyverns that show up in the main series, even though there are some very cool ones in the spin-offs, because I simply haven't had any experience with those. We'll be including variants, deviants, and subspecies this time because I want to, and monsters will be ranked based on how much I like their design, fight, and how well they fit their role in their respective games. Alrighty, that should just about do it, so without further ado, I am Peak Ginge, don't forget to like and subscribe, and this is the ultimate Brute Wyvern tier list. First on our list is the Brute Wyvern most folks will encounter first, no matter what game you start with, Barroth. Barroth was introduced back in Tri and has done a solid job of being a series constant ever since. It shows up around the 3-star mark and can be pretty confronting because it's probably going to be the most constantly aggressive monster you'll have fought at that point, as it constantly charges back and forth. It has a very recognizable design with its huge head, muddy coat, and orange-brown color, and I have a bit of fondness for Barroth mainly because of a story I told ages ago in an older video. Long story short, after finally convincing my friends to try Monster Hunter, one of them got so hard stuck on Barroth, like the most walled I've ever seen anyone walled ever in a game, that out of sheer rage, he restarted the game from the beginning. Again, I don't know why he did, but he did, and that has stuck with me for well over a decade. Barroth is cool and a great introduction on what to expect with Brute Wyverns. He goes in the A tier. Since I've decided to include all variations of a monster together with the base form, next up is Jade Barroth. This is, quite frankly, one of my favourite subspecies ever included in the series. The best way to do subspecies is to take the base monster and recontextualize it to work in a different setting while maintaining all of the aspects that make it unique, and Jade Barroth does all of those things pretty fantastically by simply taking Barroth, removing the mud, making it blue, and covering it in snow instead. It's awesome, and it's pretty wild that we haven't seen it since 3U, especially considering how well it would have worked in the Hoarfrost Reach, where they were touting all their fancy new snow physics. It goes in the A tier along with normal Barroth. Alright, let's just get this out of the way. If you know, you know. Brachydios is the best monster in the entire Monster Hunter series. No other monster is as striking visually, as unique in combat, and as fucking sweet as Brachydios is. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate's flagship monster, it introduced a meta-defining slime element to the game, which would later become Blast Flight. It punches you so hard you explode, which is just super cool in a really primal lizard brain kind of way, and it's just overall a dynamic and enjoyable fight. Visually, it's super unique with its big punchy hands, given that most other Brute Wyverns have tiny little T-Rex arms, and the combination of the deep purple shell and the bright yellow and green slime makes for a contrast that's pretty hard to beat. Brachydios ticks every single box for what I'm looking for in an awesome monster design, and is certainly the best Brute Wyvern the series has to offer. S tier for sure. More Brachydios is always a good thing, and boy does Raging Brachydios give us more. One of the few variants we got prior to Gen 5, its basic premise is take a Brachydios and make it always angry, all of the time. It was pretty solid in its original iteration, but when it was added to Iceborne, holy mother of God, was it just fucking perfect. Its sheer size, its deep green-black shell, its amped up attacks, everything about it was awesome, and I would be remiss to not mention the final phase, where it blocks all of the exits and forces you to face it in one final fight to the death. 2 enter, 1 leaves sort of thing. It's excellent and every bit as perfect as the base form. S tier as well. Alright, pickle time. The intruder to end all intruders. Deviljho was added to the series alongside the original cast of Brute Wyverns back in Monster Hunter Tri, and has been showing up at all the wrong times ever since. Deviljho is one of the most dinosaur-like of the Brute Wyverns, but I can't say its visual design is super striking, because it's just very to the point. Combat-wise, it can quickly overwhelm you if you aren't prepared, and it's one of the few monsters to be at a similar level to Elder Dragons, despite not being one itself. Even though Rajang is older, Deviljho is the monster I associate more with invaders, and is the best best example of that mechanic, so he gets points for that alone. I feel it's disrespectful to put him anywhere below A tier. Much like how Raging Brachydios is just more Brachydios, Savage Devil Joe is just more Devil Joe. Driven insane by its hunger, Savage Devil Joe is permanently enraged and crackling with sexual energy. When it gets extra mad, it steps up the visuals a good amount as it becomes overwhelmed by that red lightning we all associate with the dragon element, and it has some pretty insane uses of its dragon breath. Overall, it's a good and logical variant for Devil Joe, if not a little silly. A tier as well. Durambros is an interesting one because it appears to be pretty unassuming on the surface, a gentle giant type, and then it turns around and provides one of the goofiest fights the series has ever seen. Despite how big and bulky it is, it somehow manages to be one of the most acrobatic monsters in the roster, as it throws itself hurling and flipping through the air with the weight of its tail, and it's truly a sight to behold that will likely catch first-time hunters off guard. Visually, it's fine. It goes for the big, slow, yet still very dangerous herbivore vibe, like an elephant or a rhino, which lends itself nicely to it. Overall, whilst it's certainly unique, it's not entirely my style. Nothing wrong with it per se, but it's in the B tier on my list. Then you have its subspecies, the Rust Durambros. You remember how I said the best way to do a subspecies is to take the monster and recontextualize it in another environment? Well, this guy certainly does that, and yet I still just don't like it. I think what it comes down to is that 1, I just don't like Durambros as much as I like Baroth, and so my rose-colored glasses don't come in handy, and 2, it just looks so fleshy, man, and not in a cool way like Otogaron does. It looks like a Durambros that's been skinned, and I just ain't a fan. I understand it's supposed to be sand and oxidized minerals and it doesn't have moss all over it and all that jazz, but it just doesn't read like that to me. My man's is looking naked. C tier. Poor old Uragan. Uragan gets a pretty bad rap, and honestly, I'm not exactly here to try and change that. Visually, I think it's pretty good, and I made a point to include it in my monster designs video because I thought it deserved a moment in the spotlight. It's certainly unique looking with its giant scoots and chin, but at the end of the day, it's just not very fun to fight, I'm afraid, and I don't think it ever has been since its inception. Whilst the rolling around is neat enough, it makes for a monster that throws its weight around so much that it hits you just by moving, which has always been an annoyance. It also lays environmental hazards with its explosive rocks, and all in all, its neat visuals don't outweigh the lackluster combat. C tier. Okay, so take possibly the worst Brute Wyvern and just make it even worse. The Uragan takes a page out of the first gen subspecies book by being almost identical to the normal one, except it's a different color and hits a bit harder, effectively being a variant and not a subspecies. Now, yes, it does have slightly different abilities, but those are... Let me check my notes here. Oh yes, the ability to soil you as opposed to putting you to sleep. Excellent. Steel Uragan takes the base monster, makes it an uglier combination of colors, and makes it even less pleasant to fight. It's just kinda lazy, man, and is our first D tier of the list. And to round out the trio of chin boys, we have the Crystal Beard Uragan. Now, I personally am a bit partial to the deviants, as you'll soon see in a few monsters' time, so Crystal Beard is at a better starting point than Uragan from the jump. It's largely very similar to normal Uragan, save for a slightly more orange color, and it has a bunch of purple crystals coming out of its chin and tail. The crystals make for a nice contrast in the visuals, but at the end of the day, it's still an Uragan, man. He gets a few interesting touches like Devil Joe's rock throwing attack, the ability to throw out rocks that emit sleep gas and can also be mined, and some nice lore touches here and there, but it just isn't enough for me. Crystal Beard is with normal Uragan in the C tier. Alright, I've been a bit of a negative Nancy, let's get back to the good shit. How about we take a dinosaur and make its tail a fucking sword, eh? What is there to say about Glavenus that isn't already abundantly clear just by looking at the thing? This right here, this is some cool shit. The beauty of Glavenus lies in how they somehow made a very goofy Saturday morning cartoon concept into something that works as well as Glavenus does. The combination of his unique silhouette and his truly excellent animations, sharpening his own tail with his mouth and Beyblading towards you, make for a monster that is just as fun to look at as it is to fight. If I'm being honest, he was at his peak in Gen 4, not Gen 5, which docks him a point or two, but it's a great monster that deserves any and all love it gets. A tier. Alright, now this is another subspecies I can get behind. Acidic Glavenus is one of the most unique and creative examples of a subspecies I think the devs have ever come up with. Where normal Glavenus tail is based on a great sword, the acidic one is based on a long sword or a katana, giving the monster better control over it. Given enough time, the tail also grows corrosive crystals that cause defense down, which is just a brilliant use of a debuff that is often overlooked. Sure, they could have made it just a different element Glavenus, but they went the extra mile, and I think it worked really well. All that being said, I do like the base form a bit better, but Acidic Glavenus still belongs in the A tier. And now we come to a monster that could very easily be my single favorite monster if we lived in some crazy universe where Brachydios was never created. The Hellblade Glavenus. Take everything that makes Glavenus awesome and just amp it up to 11, and that's what this deviant is. Visually, it looks like, as the name may suggest, a Glavenus straight out of hell, which as a big dumb guy, sometimes that's all I'm looking for in a design. And the combat, bruh. I'm sure people have different opinions, but it feels like this fight was custom tailored for Adept Greatsword in Monster Hunter Generations. Truly some of the most fun I have ever had playing Monster Hunter is just chain hunting this guy because it just feels so damn good. Hellblade Glavenus joins our slimy boys up in the S tier and is a top of the list contender should Brachydios ever be Thanos snapped out of existence. And now we're on to Gen 5 Brute Wyverns. Yes, we've spoken about a couple of monsters that were in World, but the ones we're going into now first showed up in World and Iceborne. And we will start, of course, with the fuzzy pink T-Rex we were all graced with in the first Monster Hunter World trailer, Anjanath. Anjanath is a bit of a weird one because there's a part of him that doesn't feel very Monster Hunter at first, and I don't know exactly why that is. It also goes from being a middle tier monster to a top tier one in Rise, which was a bizarre decision, and I much prefer where it sits in World, but I digress. All of that being said, the part of my brain that's still just a 5-year-old who loves dinosaurs sees a T-Rex, and he likes a T-Rex, bro. What can I say? It absolutely has some unique qualities, like its extending nose and sails, and seeing him throw around a great Jagras is always fun. Anjanath hits right for me, suits its environment in the ancient forest, and gets an A-tier placement. Another shining example of taking a monster and recontextualizing it into a new environment, we have the Fulgur Anjanath. Now, I would have preferred it if this guy wasn't as much of a roamer as it ends up being, showing up in like every single map, and I think they should have just kept him to the Hoarfrost Reach, but I think it's okay. Overall, this design amps up Anjanath in just about every single way, whilst also doing a great job of feeling like its own monster. The charged up state it goes into is cool, and its visuals with the glowing blue and bright orange head are very striking. It's good shit, and Fulgur Anjanath goes in the A tier. Next up is a monster very reminiscent of the Baroth because damn does it like to charge, the Banbara. One of the first monsters you face in Iceborne, Banbara can actually be quite a handful if you aren't prepared. It's quite basic in its combat, however when it picks up trees and rocks as it charges, something about that is just really neat and adds an extra layer to the fight you don't really expect at first, as its charge attacks become much wider or gain ranged attacks as it hurls rocks at you. Much like Fulgur Anjanath, I have no idea why they let this thing roam around different maps. It's covered in long white fur for living in the snow. Why can I find it in a volcano? Banbara is cool, I think, but it sort of sits in this middle ground area where it isn't exactly my cup of tea like the Duramboros. It goes in the B tier. And last on our list is a monster that a lot of old school hunters like myself thought was a subspecies of Uragan, but is instead just closely related to it. Radoban. What can I say, man? It's just more Uragan, except easier, and haven't we had enough Uragan? Radoban shakes it up by covering this definitely not an Uragan in bones with an insane amount of parts to break off, and it suits the environment in the Rotten Vale, but it's just very forgettable to me. It's a Nakakos Uragan love child at best, and I just don't care for it. It's going in the C tier. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. The absolute, factually correct, ultimate Brute Wyvern tier list. Brute Wyverns are cool, what can I say? And I think it's pretty evident by how top-heavy this list is, but the real question is, which one is your favorite? Let me know how wrong I was in the comments down below, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all the upcoming videos, and why not share this video with a friend if you think they'll like it too. That's all for me today, folks. I'll catch you on the next video. See you later. Savage Devil Doe.